Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday, January 11th special meeting of the Dover School Board for our architect presentations tonight. If we could begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Benko, could we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Britton. Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Deschaux.
Here.
Mr. DeLauder.
Here.
Mr. Eifert.
Here.
Mr. Emmett.
Here.
Mrs. Herman. Here. Mrs. Maley. Here. Mr. Rawhauser.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our first public comment period. This is a 3-minute period for items on or off of tonight's agenda. If you have anything that you would like to comment on, you may come to the microphones over here at the table. State your name and address for the record, please. Okay, seeing nobody on the move, we will move right into our architect presentations tonight. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Cherry and Mr. Nelson for any introductions they'd like to make, and we'll go from there.
I'm going to go ahead and defer to Mr. Nelson.
Introductions?
Yep.
We have tonight McKissick Associates presenting. We have Vern McKissick and Rick, I can't think of your last name. Archer. So, and the rest of the group, I'm not sure.
Testing. Okay, there we are. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be back. As we were riding out here, we had not realized it had been 4 months. It was a much warmer and nicer season when we drove out that night. But a lot easier to be inside tonight and listen to us go on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Actually, I think it's going to be pretty cool. When this young lady makes her magic, I think you guys will like it. So we are McKissick Associates coming out of Harrisburg. And one of the things I did note in our preparing, we did take opportunity to look at some of your YouTube channels. And one of the items I did want to hit right up front, there was perhaps some misunderstanding that we weren't necessarily based in Harrisburg or from Harrisburg. We own our building. It was news to my wife. We've lived in Harrisburg for 24 years. And but that is our main office. We do, as many other firms have other offices. We've purchased other firms in Western Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina, but our home office with our 20 architects is right on Front Street in Harrisburg, and we've been in the same location now for about 14 years. We bought one of the big old brownstones about 2 blocks down from the courthouse. So with me this evening, though, we also have Mike Hall, and Mike will introduce himself. I'll introduce him in a moment. Mike is our educational consultant, and specifically, oops, looks like I ran a little ahead of me. Am I pointing at your computer or at the remote?
Right here.
Okay. And just our background. So what we kind of like to say is we have an interesting merger. McKissick has the extensive experience, $1.5 billion in Pennsylvania in schools, where Fanning is bringing us $1.3 billion in just high school experience in the past 6 years, in 92 high schools. We have done a lot in Pennsylvania, in the area from Erie to Philadelphia to Wellsboro to Johnstown to Scranton. We go where we go. My father, I'm originally from Wellsboro. My father was a school superintendent, so I'm used to being everywhere in Pennsylvania. And my family came here in 1753 with General Forbes to attack the French and Indians, and camped at the Dill Tavern, which we found out when we were renovating it for a night chap. So, one of the things I think that we wanted to make sure we underscored, and I think is important to you, is the issue of how much experience that we are bringing to the table and why Fanning's here with us. They have 19 new high schools in the past 5 years, designed, bid, built, all around the country, and we're going to show you on some virtual tours here. Closer to home in Pennsylvania, I think there may have been some allusions that perhaps other firms that we're interviewing had not designed, bid, and build new high schools in Pennsylvania. And the one thing I will state is there aren't a lot of new high schools built in Pennsylvania. They're normally a renovation, alteration. But In the past 10 or so years, we have had the opportunity to work on a number of ones, such as the Big Spring High School, which you're probably all familiar with. That was Rick and my project. New Wellsboro High School. This was the first high school in the state designed to lead silver back in 2005, before there was any additional aid. It was just the right thing to do there up in God's country, as we call it in Wellsboro. It was great to get back to my hometown and do the high school. And even something as large as Reading Citadel. Now, this was not a new building, but it was a new high school. It was a 600,000 square foot hospital that we repurposed into a 3,000 student school. So we have done it. Beyond us, Manheim Township, you probably have had there if you've done AYSO or traveled sports. That was Mike's project. And if you've been over in the Pittsburgh region, Upper St. Clair High School. So we are bringing both national and Pennsylvania experience to the table, and I think it's a nice blend towards those ends. As I alluded to, over 60% of our work has been renovations. That's the nature of what we do, and I think the ratio for the folks at Fanning has been very similar. The brochure that's here, and we'll give you a copy of this afterwards, this was a publication by PDE, the School Board Association, PHMC, and it was about renovate or replace. And I point this out, we did a lot of development on it, and I was honored, they picked one of my buildings for the cover. And all the board members, if you've been on about 10 years, you probably got a copy of this from the state. And I think the key thing for us is we have figured out a way to determine that there are old buildings and there are good old buildings. And I think I sense that in some of the questions that you guys have put out for us. Our focus on renovations has been extensive. In this particular case, we're receiving an award from Tom Ridge for our new Reading High School through 10,000 Friends of Pennsylvania. Sustainability, we've been at this for a long time. We'll combine our totals. We have over 60 lead registered projects that have been done. So that's, again, just who we are. Hopefully that's one of the reasons you have us here, and that was in our documentation. One of the things we also want to tell you about, since we have a few moments, is the personnel. Who are we? Well, to start off with Mike. Mike is an educational planner firsthand. Stand up and partner with Fanning Howey, 40 years experience, a little more gray than I have, but I'm trying to catch up as best I can. His speaking or his awards are extensive: ASNU, National School Board Association, AASA, you name it, Fanning's really been up there. His speaking and writing is well respected around the country, which as we get to the issue of 21st century, or maybe we don't even like the term 21st century, and he'll talk about that. My background is a little bit different, but similar. I am the owner of McKissick Associates, a very hands-on person. You will see me working on your projects. Over 30 years experience, and I would be the primary contact. My background, in addition to being an architect, is I decided I had a great idea to get back into the AE program and get my master's in construction management. And I actually found I learned more there than I did in architecture school. And she's a Penn State grad, so she won't admit it, but involved in CEFP, which is now known as Association for Learning Environments, a lead accredited professional. In Harrisburg, been very involved as city resident. As I mentioned, vice chair of the City Planning Commission. I chair the Parking Authority, so if you want some interesting stories on parking, I can tell you all kind of cool things with Harrisburg. Past chair Department of General Services Selection Committee, and sitting right now on the AI Pennsylvania PlanCon Working Committee, where we're trying to keep this in the forefront and educate the legislators. So awards, again, similar. You know, we don't chase awards, they just seem to kind of happen. We do a lot of speaking. We've been very honored to be able to do that both at college and K-12. One of the things that I think we really do bring to the table is PlanCon familiarity. If you use a PlanCon form, the original versions of those I developed and donated to the state. And Brad Fury took them from me and made them the state's. Otherwise, he wouldn't let me use them. That was the deal. We had typewriters and whiteout, and that got very old. So that goes all the way back to the early 90s. So we're very familiar with it, how it exists, what form it will exist in. We know what we think you have at least the high school in under the window, so we'll work within that. Rick Archer is with us this evening. Rick has been a partner of mine. We've worked together now since 1989, I guess, at least. Second in command, 35 years experience, again, just a wonderful school architect. So Rick, you want to pick it up from here?
Okay. It's like mutton, Jeff. So we sit down. Tall and short. Yeah, tall and short. We won't get into all the team players, but what's critical is the team that's here. We've worked a lot together. Larry Baker's done an awful lot of work for us over the past decade. Bill Heartland with HF Lens, we've worked on for 30 years on over nearly $750 million worth of work. John will be our new face through here, but he's the local civil engineer that we're working with. And as we go through, again, it just gives us an extensive inventory and depth of a project team that has an awful lot of experience. Larry, you may want to speak a little bit about yourself in the next two slides.
Sure. It says civil engineer.
Wait, we didn't catch that, yeah.
But actually,
That just means you're a nice guy.
it says civil engineer, but actually it's structural engineer, Penn State architectural engineer. Master's from Villanova, been designing structural systems for buildings for over 40 years now. Have a long history of working with Vern McKissick, both with new buildings and renovations of existing buildings.
I'm going to get you that fast.
And look forward to continuing that relationship. And Vern usually comes up with some challenging situations for us. And we'll talk more later on about what I call Baker Ingram visioneering. We're the visioneers. He provides the vision, we do the math.
Bill?
Good evening. My name is Bill Heartland. I am with HF Lens Company. I've been working with HF Lens since 1983. That's when I started my career. I was a degreed electrical engineer, but over the years I've learned probably more mechanical than anything else, and I run projects now for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades. I have I've worked with these two guys, Rick and Vern, since probably the late 80s. Have done many projects together. I often say that we can almost, to a certain degree, complete each other's sentences. I know what they like to do, what they like me to do, what I need to do in working with them. In regard to our company, as I said, our company was founded in 1946, and our bread and butter was education, K-12 schools. Since that time, we have diversified, but we've always kept a core group of people that design the K-12 schools, and I'm in charge of that group of people. One of the things that helped us in our diversification is the fact that we now have people in our office to draw upon. As you can see there, we have 165 employees. We do a lot of data centers. So I can call upon someone who doesn't necessarily design schools every day, who's an expert in data. We have people who are NICET certified for fire protection sprinkler. I can call upon their expertise to help me if I need help on a school for a sprinkler. Again, many projects and much work with Vern and Rick. And we've been around a long time. As you see, 85% of our work is from repeat clients, and we think that's important. When we work with people, they like what we do, and they call us back.
John? I think it's important you meet the individuals because it is the team. This won't be a bait and switch. People here at the interview will be the team that will work on your projects.
Thank you. John Snyder with RGS. We're the site civil firm. We are located in Harrisburg, York, and Lancaster. I work out of two offices, Harrisburg and York. I guess I've been doing some projects with Vern for about 15 years, different school projects. But we've done quite a bit in the township, and we have a lot of local knowledge. Development out Admire Road, the old Surefine that's going to be the Lytle grocery store. We specialize in working in this area, and that's what we do. We try to bring entitlements quickly by utilizing our relationships with the local borough, local township officials.
Thank you. Well, as we move forward, we'd like to talk a little bit about how our team approaches a project and somewhat of the definition of the scope of services. We haven't talked about contracts or anything to any degree, but we basically break it down into a level A, B, or C. Typically, the start of conversations for contracts are around level B. It's all inclusive. And when you go back down through and see what we offer as our basic services, we think it's a pretty good bargain. But again, we hope to get to that opportunity that we can work on that. And when we work on projects, there's basically 4 project phases. 1 is the groundwork. 2 happens to be the design. Next is the construction. And then the closeout or celebration. As we go through, We're going to be dividing this up before you ask. We do have an association. We have that expert that's coming through to help us design this building. On the other hand, we are the local architect of record. So as you go through the programming phase, you'll see that Mike and his team will take the yeoman's toll of about 70%. As we start going through schematic design, design development, that role will diminish a little bit so that we will pick up that role. Once it goes out to bid, we are the locals. We'll be working with the contractors, if you have a construction manager, that entity, and then we start bidding it, awarding it, and we will be your hands-on individuals from Harrisburg on any project that takes place through and even into the point of post-construction. And when that's done, we will be working on the planning and development, defining the needs, and Mike will talk a little bit more about this, kicking it off with the CM if you happen to have one. We'll align the costs with the budgets. We'll do appropriate evaluations for the sites, working with John over here, the surveyors, the testing and development, and we'll establish what's known as the building advisory team. Team is essential to work through here that embraces the community. It's anybody who becomes a stakeholder that you authorize to become a stakeholder to work with us. And once that building advisory team becomes formed, we then turn it over to the leadership of Mike to do his assurance program.
I'm Michael Hall. I'm an architect, educational facility planner, president of Fanning Howey. We have over 100 people. We specialize in K-12. We work all over the country. Our role in the project is to bring some of the forward-thinking, high-performance learning environments into the discussion and place them before you to decide what's right for your school district. In order to get the right answers for you and your community, we have a program we call STEPS, which brings you the assurances of several things. Number one, that whatever your district values are, those are going to be incorporated in your buildings and your design in the process. Number two, whatever your educational vision is, we will incorporate that in whatever we're doing in the design of the work, that we'll have appropriate solutions for you that fit you, that fit your teaching staff, that fit your vision for 21st century education. We'll maintain realistic costs. We believe in price early, price often. So don't wait until bid day to see what your costing is, but check it all the way through. The other thing I'd like to stress is I believe that boards of education, I've been doing K-12 for 43 years, been with Fanning Howey 33. It's all I've ever done is K-12. I think boards are elected to make decisions. And I think sometimes boards are afraid if there's too much stakeholder involvement that they'll lose control of the project. So I like to go to the stakeholders, I like to get input, but I like to define for them that it's input and the final decision rests at the feet of the board. Whatever the decision might be, you are the folks that have to live with this when these buildings are completed. It's your community. You have to shoulder that burden of making decisions for everybody else in the community. And you have a lot of money here that could be on the table. And so we want to help you do that. We want you to maintain control of this project, and we want that budget managed all the way along so that there aren't any surprises down the road. Our program starts down at the bottom with the vision, working with you to identify what your vision is, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we'll move to the research step, which is looking at your existing buildings, your sites, the utilities, your curriculum, all the data that's out there that we need to bring into the discussion. At some point, we'll engage the community. That can be as broad or as narrow as you would like it to be. We've done community meetings, 3 or 4 in a district of 250 people each, down to 12-person design teams. However, whatever you think is right, we will do that. The funding piece, again, it's got to be consistently established and checked, making sure that the community is getting the reasoning for some of the decisions that you're making and the expenditure of dollars to make these things happen. And then we go to the design and the construction. At the end of the project, we like to have a celebration with you and your community. And then about a year after you're done, we come back and do what we call a post-occupancy evaluation, which is how did we achieve the vision? Did we do what you wanted to do? Are other things we should be doing now maybe to further implement the vision? One of the things that we've had to do in the last couple of years with teaching staff is in these newer buildings, these quote 21st century buildings, is to do what we call educational commissioning, which is bring them into the building before the building opens and explain to them why this building is the way it is and how you should teach in it. And we think that's part of the process that needs to be included, not just lead commissioning, engineering commissioning, but educational commissioning, so that the buildings get used the way that they were intended. And teaching is a little bit different today than what you and I experienced, and sometimes teachers need to understand why this wall should open or how these technology pieces can be used in the curriculum. So we think that that whole part of after the fact is very important. So we do a 3.5, 4-hour workshop right at the front. That's the first thing we'll do. We're going to talk to you, number one, what are we going to do? What is the plan? How are we going to do it? Who's going to help us do it? Is it your design team? Is it your educational leaders? Who's going to help us with this stuff? And then who will make the final decisions? Again, that's you, and that mantra is going to be repeated, that the board makes the decisions. We'll bring your input in, place it on the table. They may accept it, they may not. I've worked with a lot of boards that sometimes it's like, no, we're not doing that one. I mean, they may think it's right, but we're going to be here a long time. That's not right. Or some of them, they find things that input comes into the process, like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we want you to maintain that control. What will the process produce when we're done with these buildings? What are we producing here? What are we doing for your kids? And then your schedule. When do we need to complete things? If it's a new high school, what's your expectation on when it will be done? If it's renovation of the intermediate school, how's that going to work? If it's renovation of the high school, when does that need to happen? Are these projects simultaneous or are they phased? And these things all need to be talked about up front, not when you're in the heat of battle. So I've been using this process for 5, 10 years now with boards, just up front to get everybody clear, because at some point down the road, we're going to be gone. And a lot of you may be gone too, going on to other things, but people are going to want to know who made that decision and why was it made, and I want all that stuff documented, and I think you would too. So it's a workshop called Steps, and it's very productive. And then we engage your community in the fashion that you would like to see them engage. Present potential design solutions to them, whether it's one or whether it's 3 or whether it's options, that's up for you to decide. But whatever we present needs to meet your district values, your goals, your criteria that you want to see in these buildings. And then we communicate your goals up front to everybody, post them on the district website. We'll establish project websites so that as design work progresses, the community can see it. If they can't get to meetings, they can find it on the web. And then presentations to the community, however you want to do it. So it's from my experience of 43 years in K-12, if we don't do it, somewhere down the road, somebody stumbles. Somebody walks into a building and said, who in the heck had that idea? That's dumb. So we think it's important to get all this clear up front. So that's the overview. It's from point A to point X. And I use it on every one of my projects, and our staff uses it too. But part of it is just what it says in the bottom corner. Building consensus with everybody, one step at a time. There's a logical way to do this, and we can bring that to the table. The other thing we'll do is some design charrettes. These are 2-day, 3-day workshops where you've got everybody in a room with ideas up on the wall, checking them out, moving things around. This is at the Rio Rancho High School in Albuquerque. Adults playing with foam blocks. That was really cool, watching adults playing. But they're designing a building. And, they're putting classrooms where they think they should be. And then we do some sketch work. It was a lot of fun. But we generate a lot of ideas and a lot of solutions very, very quickly, and we bring that back to you to make a final decision on that. And so with that, I think it's back to Vern, right?
Thank you, Mike. As we move out of conceptual design into schematic design, design development, those are the steady elimination of ideas, and kind of, we like to say it's a funnel moving towards the final solution. We do utilize some very interesting tools, one of which we're going to show you here in a moment. We do all Revit, BIM, that's the building information modeling, that's the world where it's going now, where everything is in 3D. We don't necessarily use it for site civil yet. It hasn't quite gotten to that point, but we'll use integrated tools. One of the other things then we get into in construction phase, if we produce the drawings, we bid. In construction phase, there's a great deal of coordination. It has to do with interior concepts, color, materials. We do that internally. The third-party cost estimate. So we don't know what you're thinking about for construction manager or not. We work in both formats, putting all our bids together. We will, of course, solicit the bids. We will help you select alternates in and out, process requests for information, change orders, et cetera. One of the things that I also want to mention is if any of you is a really CAD wonk, I know there's some nice stuff you're doing in the high school. We're looking at level 300, and that'll mean something. As we get into then the actual closeout of the project, one of the questions is how do you bring the job to closure? How do you communicate? And one of the things that we've found is we've begun about 4 or 5 years ago using something called Submittal Exchange. We've gone through a number of software packages, but this is an internet-based way where every submittal, every question, everything that happens in a project happens electronically. And in the old days, we waited for the UPS and the mail to come. Now things are coming in the morning. My engineers are answering questions in the afternoon, and by the next day, the solutions are in place. And it's been amazing at what it's done. At the end of the job, you have an electronic database that you get a copy of, and you know the whole history of the project for the next 50 or 100 years. So, and then of course, celebration. That's what we're trying to get to, is that ribbon cutting, and sometimes it can be a really great day. So, moving into approach, I know Rick, if you want to talk a little bit about these. Okay. 21st century learning. Okay, well, what defines it? Well, in education, this is what education was. Cells and bells, corridor with classrooms on two sides. It was the factory model. Today, it's a bit more amorphous. It's not necessarily, linear as it was once upon a time, more like the stream that's meandering. Corridors. You recognize the corridor at the top. This is the corridors now. They're places to gather. They're places for learning to happen, accidental learning, called collaborators. In the classrooms, they used to be called the sage on the stage. Teacher stood up and preached. Today, they're the guide on the side, helping the students, working with their own learning methodologies. Food service. We have gone from the days of mashed potatoes and being tossed on a bowl to a space that's more like a Panera. Now, probably the best description of our knowledge commons and the way things are coming together. The library itself, we've just finished. We're opening one at Westmont, for example. We eliminated the library. The library is the cafeteria, and we have an information concierge, not a librarian. Really a neat thing. So, subjects. What are we teaching the kids? Well, it was English, math, SOP, science. Today it's communications, fluid dynamics, molecular genetics, STEM, STEAM. There's all kind of acronyms there to use. What will be in 2028? I have no clue, but your building's going to have to be there and be able to support whatever it becomes. Jobs in 1950 were agriculture, manufacturing, blue versus white discussion, white collar. Today it's app developers. Last week, Money Magazine named that as the #1 job. It didn't exist 10 years ago. Computer science, home care aides, a lot of medical-related issues, which could tie into your CTC and some of your zip codes. In 2028, your building has to support it, but now your students have to adapt for jobs that don't exist yet. So, what does the future hold?
For me, hopefully, it holds Starbucks, because it's one of my favorite places to go. We don't know. We're educating kids, like Vern said, for jobs that don't even exist yet, with technologies that we don't know about. We're going to show you something tonight that just blows me away that we can even do it. But we now have a client that we're working with that won't make any decisions on their new high school until they go through that process of visualization. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a video about a state-of-the-art high school outside of Albuquerque.
Students can tell you what they want and what they need, and they were very vocal about how they wanted the school to be different than others. We looked at a book called The World is Flat, and we tried to determine what kind of school students needed to be successful in the greater world.
The community was very upfront with telling us that they had high expectations for the facility and how it performed, not only with the instruction and all of the programming, but how it interacted with the community.
As an architect, you really need to look at the bigger picture. You need to look at all the aspects of the facility, all the goals of the facility. In this particular instance, all the academic goals, all the sustainable goals, all of the goals that the students had and brought to us in terms of a comfortable environment, and really worked through multiple scenarios, multiple plans, multiple solutions for each one of them.
When you're planning a new project, I think it's very important to bring everyone on board. All the players need to be there, the community, the instructors, the architect, the planners, the ed spec writers.
We came to the school together and it was built for us. We all felt that way.
All of us worked tirelessly in collaboration to achieve this goal, which is magnificent when you see the students enjoying it and using it the way that everybody had anticipated.
This idea that we want to prepare kids to be participants in a more global society yielded itself to the design and to the program delivery.
Research has shown that natural lighting really has an effect on student performance, as well as increased ventilation and just a healthy environment.
I feel like I'm learning more, especially with the higher technology.
Everything's laid out nice and easy.
Our students, our parents, our business community would say that we met the vision and that we're very pleased with the outcome of this school.
And we were the educational planners on that with a partner firm, like we are partners with McKissick here. So, question here is, how far do you want to go in your educational vision? We're seeing a convergence today in education. There's collaborative learning. I noticed that on the chart over there earlier, collaborative space, collaborative approach. There's also sustainability, which many times the kids get that more better than the adults get it. They understand it. There's integrating technology in the classroom, and we cannot forget safety and security. That is preeminent in today's school design. So all these come together in this 21st century school design. Whatever name you want to call the educational delivery, there are tons of names out there. There's project-based learning, there's differentiated instruction, there's imagination stations, there's team teaching, there's connecting, there's the ecology of change. All these things are occurring out there in the educational environment. Our spaces need to be adaptable to that. And technology, again, do you want to go one-to-one? We like to have places for kids just to get off by themselves with their technology and do what they're supposed to be doing in terms of educating themselves, but they've all got cell phones. They're all doing other things. So how you integrate that, how far you want to integrate that in your school, that's really up to you. And again, that's a value decision that we need to talk about up front because it certainly affects the design. One of the things we've discovered is when we put the buildings in neighborhoods, smaller neighborhoods, we're like, this is 6, but we've done them with 8 rooms, 10 rooms, even 12 rooms, and there's a collaboration space in the middle. This becomes what we call a shelter-in-place area. There are restrooms within this area. There's a teacher planning area. There's a special ed area. This is a lockable entry. When they go into lockdown, this thing locks down as its own house. Kids have an exit out the back. If it's a multi-story building, 2 or 3 stories, they can exit and get outside and lock down. Now, I hate to have to talk about that, but it's a reality. And we got to keep the buildings safe. And this approach in smaller neighborhoods seems to hit all these 4 convergence points in terms of 21st century education. So we'll bring that into the discussion as well. This is the next generation science labs. It's a different lab than you and I went to, but it's what is used today in project-based learning in these types of environments. And this is another one. This has got 1 meter grid on the floor, and the orange line there is the sun path across this building. It's all integrated into the science learning. It's a really exciting space. And I mean, I wish I had gone to a school like that. Those hoods drop down. They've got water, gas, electric, and vent in them. So that's all stuff that we're bringing into the discussion for you. This is used to be called the library, then the media center. We're calling it the research commons, because here's the question. If everything that you need in nonfiction is on your phone, on your tablet, how many books do you need in a library? There's a new middle school in Greenville, South Carolina. 1,800 middle school kids, they have 300 books in the library. Normally, we're looking at 14, 16, 18,000 volumes. So again, where do those materials reside? Shouldn't they reside in the house with the students where they're valuable, rather than a huge repository of books. But this is something you as a board need to discuss and come to grips with and make some decisions about. This is that collaboration space I pointed out. Interesting thing about this is you'll notice all these furniture pieces have wheels, because we are the civilization that took us over 8,000 years to figure out we need to put wheels on our luggage. And so now, why do we not have mobile furniture for kids? Why can't kids move around in a building? Why can't teachers rearrange it the way they want to deliver instruction? Pay attention to this, because this is actually a collaboration space in a high school that we are currently in design on right here. It's a high school pod. You can see it's shelter in place. It's got a collaboration space. It's got restrooms in it. It's got exits out the back. And this is for an 1,800 student high school. So it works whatever size the building is. Now watch this. This is what we call the dancing chairs. And what this is an educational pod in a modern building where flexibility happens not just at Christmas break. Flexibility can happen every hour of the day. Every 20 minutes it can happen. If you have the right furniture in the space, you have operable walls where teachers can reconfigure space, or at the end of the day, they can bring all these kids together for maybe a video connection to an astronaut, which is what they do in that building, the Colonel Smith Middle School. They have a STEM program with an astronaut, and he beams himself in over Skype once a week, and they bring everybody together to talk about it. So we have, those type of things to bring to the table. And now I think we have some conceptual ideas on your buildings that Vern is going to share with
you. So you did ask for a few opinions, and that's one thing that we as architects always have, opinions on everything. The district concept, as explained to us in our walkthrough, talking about a new high school at the intermediate school site and repurposing the existing high school for middle school use. So we took a few moments and began to look at how that might actually manifest itself. Now, to start, this is simply extract from what we believe were the numbers you were looking at in the spring when you approved. That was a $53 million number, which is in the Plan Con, page A04, for the new building. And I think the study referenced about $10.6 million for converting the high school to a middle school, for a total of about $64 million, about 65. So we said, okay, how do we believe that? Should it be different? Should it be more? Should it be less? So we started by looking at the school site, and we took a footprint from a building, kit of parts, but very similar to something we'll show you in a moment. And yes, we do believe we can certainly fit a high school on your site. The key issue being, of course, that you've got to build this building, keep this operational, so your sports fields are disrupted for the most part. You're losing at least 4, perhaps 5. We do know that there is additional acreage available that may require stream crossing and some other things, and so we've given consideration to that. As we go to the high school site, the current high school site, the key feature here, of course, is the stadium. One of the things we looked at was how to make sense of this building, because it's very confusing when you get inside. In a middle school, you want to have the ability to have teaming. You want to have the ability to create houses with students of like age groups, particularly 6th grade transition years. So what we're thinking may make some sense is to do a tear down of the oldest section, the wood frame and so on and so forth. That's about 26,000 square feet. And a little bit of new construction just to align classrooms in the right place, about 13,000 square feet. So we're actually reducing from 210 down to about 197,000 square feet. And the one thing, again, I do want to point out, the one thing that this issue that you have raised with us is the issue of access to the stadium if the high school's over here. And whether being PennDOT and how cooperative they aren't, putting in roads, bridges, and so on and so forth. So we looked at what a configuration the inside might look like. This is the main floor of the building, and we kind of overlaid a modern building. And that is, this is the 3-story wing. You currently have the cafeteria and library here, your auditorium, the newer gymnasium. And we simply said, what if we took the heart of the building the area that currently holds your STEM areas, your shops, and so on, and either demolish or reconstruct. And we think we probably can reconstruct, expose the structure, create a very interesting area, place a small addition on the back, and then what we did is we created 3 teaching teams per grade level of 5 classes, so that you have science, special education, all the other features. Large areas we're suggesting where the cafeteria had been could become STEM-specific area. Perhaps the kitchen would pick up as some science areas. Auditorium, of course, you're reducing the student population by 1/3, so it becomes more appropriately sized. And a lot of the other pieces here are still usable. Second level, again, is not terribly dissimilar. We create a 7th grade grouping. We create 8th grade groupings through existing space. And we look at additional science and STEM area where the library had been. So with this, we create a modern diagram, the partie that you would get with a newer building, but we're doing it within the older building and making that work. And of course, the basement area, the walkout, would continue to exist, which is one of the features. Now, when we sent our materials to you earlier in the fall, the focus was on new building. But we just want to show you a couple examples of some of our cost-effective renovations. This happens to be Mount Union High School, for example. This was $103 a square foot for new construction, about $115 for renovation. Geothermal conversion of a building built in 1952. And before and afters, windows above, how windows can be treated. Cafeterias can become very different with just a few features. Library made sense under found space to become an art room. The very small music suite made sense to remove the corridor wall and turn it into an entire music zone. Gymnasiums can be cleaned up. Classrooms, this is my favorite, can become that. Same room. Auditorium, we know you had questions with yours before. Same space, same exact space. So how does this work from a dollar standpoint? Well, we saw a new building, and I think as we alluded to before, we think that $250 is probably more than you need. We think through some efficiencies and some usability overlays that we could do it with 230,000 square feet. And that would run out to about $36.8 million construction. Professional fees would be about $2.4 million. Again, we're using a 5.5% figure here. In the case of movable fixtures, we use the number off your plan com because we don't know what the thinking was behind it. That might be a number you want to look at a little closer. It may be on the light side. Site development, we've included monies to build 5 new sports facilities to competition standard. We've included monies to cross the hollow and to develop stuff on the elementary school site. So that's in this 7.6 plus parking lots and stormwater and all the other goodies. Additional construction related costs would be about 3.3. This is about, we're still about 7.6%. I'd probably look at this a little more. It seems a little light to us, as did the financing. The financing's about 1.4%. We've been seeing 2.5 to 2.8. Now, there are a lot of assumptions we don't know. So they may be the right numbers, but they jumped out at us. But we're seeing about $51 million, 51.5 for the new building on the intermediate site. And this also under site development includes the cost of demolishing the existing building. So the conversion, as I mentioned, you'd have 197,000 square feet when done, 183 existing. We tear down about 30,000 square feet. We're seeing about 15.3 million. Design fees about 922, site development about $1.3 million. We don't have nearly as much happening there. And additional construction related costs would be $1.2 million, financing, so about $19.2 million. Now I think the number we're comparing against was about 11. Our concern was, well, you could do maintenance work on that building and maybe do a couple of discrete spaces. You're not going to remake it into a 21st century middle school without that level of adjustment. So we think that might be a little light. But hold that thought because we have an option to maybe address that cost.
I think that the word 10 years came up, and it was 10 years ago that Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. So when you think about what you were doing 10 years ago with or without that little beast, it was amazing. When we walked your site, we were given some literature to look at, and it encouraged us to think perhaps differently than what was presented previously. It was probably the coldest day in December when we went out for the tour, so we went through rather expediently. But I'm a thinker. I like to try and go out of the box, and Vern is as well. So when we were taking the tour through the high school, we saw it very clearly. There was a lot of issues addressed. What doesn't work? The auditorium's undersized. The gym doesn't have the capacity. This is a 1921 building. We don't have this, and this, handicapped. So there's a lot of, oh wow, woes and me's. We then walked over, across the street, went over to the intermediate school, and we were pleasantly surprised to see the condition of the elementary school. Based upon what we had learned until that time, that's the one you were thinking about demolishing. I don't think it should be demolished in this scheme. It's got great bones. You had a bad ESCO project, without a doubt. I mean, you've got things hanging down there from air conditioning units and things of that nature. But overall, that building is a very well-built building. You know, terrazzo, condition, the whole thing. So we looked at each other and said, what if we kept it? And then we learned more by asking questions on the tour, and we learned that there was the possibility of making it a middle school. So it took it from a 7-8 to a 6-7-8, and then Vern and I looked at each other and said, bingo, we got to go a different route. So let's come back with another option. So after the tour was over, we put our gloves back on, we walked back over to the high school site. But let me go first on the intermediate school. At the intermediate school site, without encroaching into any of the existing fields that are there, our presumption is that we can corner off and square off some of these corners. There it goes. Very easily. Add a little two-story addition through here. But by coming back through here and taking your natatorium, we can infill that and repurpose those spaces. And as Vern discussed, we can create that 3-classroom cluster for 7th grade over through here. We can create a new 6th grade cluster here, and there's another floor above it. We occupy that natatorium, fill it in, make it another auxiliary gym. We put a corridor that comes back through here that connects. We take advantage of that wider corridor and the space that used to be the administration space through here, make that once again a knowledge commons, a STEM center, whatever it is at the elementary school, down from the kitchen. We take the administration, the guidance, bring it up to the front for security, and we've contained everything in a very well-built, constructed building that can be renovated very handily and very easily. Upstairs, there would be a nominal addition over here that would allow you to put all your 8th grade students up through here, and then on this corner where we infill it, we occupy it for the 6th grade. It's very clean, it's very efficient, and quite frankly, the building really has great opportunities for another 35 to 40 years of existence without being torn down. This building is about 130,000 square feet. 123,000 square feet existing, so sort of keep that number in your head. Well, Vern and I walked over to the other site, and we said, why are we trying to put a high school on one side of the site when the stadium's over there? It works right now with the building there and the stadium there, and in the community, the high school and the stadium are the monumental spaces for the community. I mean, if one likes athletics, it's the stadium. If it's academics, it's the high school. We can keep it on the same site. And Vern and I love a challenge. And so we walked over, we went to the edge of the slope, and we looked down onto the soccer fields and said, you know, we can put a building here. And we can build that building, and we can build it new and make it work and make it fit. And when that's done, we can either move the new high school students in there and then move the intermediate school students over here and renovate the intermediate school into a middle school, or keep the high school students there, let the intermediate students play around here for a year until the renovations are done. But the bottom line is we can fit a new high school right on this edge. And what's really nice is the distance, the vertical distance from that soccer field up to the parking lot is about 16 feet. Perfect vertical floor-to-floor height for the CTE programs that we're going to place at the bottom as we go through. The other nice thing about this is by placing all the athletic services on the bottom, they can now walk out and go directly to the stadium or the phys ed fields, which are right here. So as you go through here, if you can see the footprint, this is your existing building through here. This would be your new building at this point. Single entrance for the buses to stack and go out, separate entrance for the cars to come through, and then a 2-lane as you come in off of West Canal Street to come through here. Coming down through Reservoir Drive, there would be an upper service area that would come into the kitchen and or the delivery area for the mechanical rooms, or coming down a little bit lower, you come into the CTE additional parking. But as you go through the main floors, at the lower level, which I failed to put the word pool, but this would be your pool. You were talking about a pool that would be newly constructed, the gym, the locker rooms, et cetera. The CTE programs, which are at the lowest level again, we're working with the site. The site doesn't have to be excavated, it's there. The building is built from the site up, and what we're doing is we're capturing the elevations and the contours perfectly on this building, which is a good, cost-effective approach. As we move vertically up through there, the main entrance comes into the core of the building, which now has art, music, a new auditorium, kitchen, deliveries, mechanical, scenery for the back to work with your drama and theatrical portions, a knowledge commons, which is the place, whether it's what Mike showed you or your own certain place of cafeteria, dining, eating, library, whatever. And then on the left-hand side, we see some of the CTE programs coming up to be community-based. We've done a lot of floral programs, florists and things of that nature. They may want to be approachable to be a consumer type of a thing with the community. And then this becomes the upper portions of the gymnasium and the athletic. On this side, if you remember Mike's sketch that he showed you with the modulars and the open collaborators and working spaces, that would be 2 classroom levels for classrooms and labs that would be terraced up into a second floor at this particular level. About 230,000 square feet is what this building would be. Again, this is a kit of parts of schools. This is not your design, but it could be your design or start of a dialogue to create a design. And here's an animation as we go through of a sketch of a building similar to this. We just tried to show you some of the massing and some of the articulation. Remember now, you're looking from West Canal Street through the parking lot to your new building. I mean, it presents itself. It's a front lawn, it's a front facade. And as you come back down through the spaces, I'll stop this here now. I think I'll stop it. There we go. So we'd like to move over to here. We're almost done here. I know we've got a little bit longer time here, but we'd like to take you inside this building. And it's a virtual reality tour. And
just take it from there.
You go from there.
All right. Okay, what we're going to show you is using the actual CAD data, the same BIM data that's used to create working drawings. And in fact, these documents were produced before we knew that this was possible. This is an after-the-fact development we were working in our office. And we showed you an animation. Okay, that's very still, that's very static. You know, everybody's seeing the Iron Man, so you make computers do whatever you want them to do. But what is the real nature of the space? What's too small? What's too big? What are those kinds of things? And this is a way we have to show us. You want to hop in? You can be our little bit, and we'll talk a little bit. What we're able to do is physically immerse within the environment, and she'll do a little demonstration. And I'm going to be looking for a volunteer, much like the musician does. Be looking for a
We're having this young lady do this because they love video games.
And so you're entering the building, for example. You want to look to the left to the secure entrance. You can see the outer office. If you go further inside the building, you go to the heart of the building, which is the Knowledge Commons. And the spaces that are there. Now, in real time, note her head. As she turns and looks, the view changes. She's actually inside the building. So at this point, I'm going to look for a volunteer. And do I have one? Yeah, I was going to say I was going to grab your superintendent. He looked like he was a pretty go kind of a guy. But would I be able to tap you, sir?
Sure. Well, it's like Mr. Ronhauser, kind of the least technological person here. So.
The sound. You want to step back to foot or two? There we are. you look up. Look to your left, to your right. You are there.
Yeah, while he's doing this, you need to understand, this building hasn't been built yet. We're still doing the construction documents on it. But it's all been visualized in cyberspace, and we use this with our client. This is the client I was telling you about earlier, won't make any decisions on anything until they can see it and walk through it. So it's our first project doing it this way, but it's been a lifesaver to bring people into not just looking at drawings, because not everybody understands drawings. Heck, I don't understand them all the time. But this, you can see exactly what you're going to get, the colors that you want, the spaces that you want, the size that you want. And I have vertigo, and they walked me through this yesterday and took me up on the flyway in the auditorium so I could look down. And I was a little sick at my stomach when we got done, but yeah.
Quick question, just so I understand what we're looking at there. Like in this concept, somebody walking into that building going towards the auditorium would be walking through the exactly what theirs is like.
Right, the dining space. Right. Right.
Okay.
So it becomes more like a food commons in the mall than a closed cafeteria space.
And the ones we've done and renovated or new buildings, do they have the problem getting kids to go home at night? Because it's replaced the narrative.
It's also for the after hours for parents.
Yes.
When you're in 9th grade and 10th grade, not every child drives, and they're drama's done, or science lab's done, or there's something going on. So parents walk into these knowledge commons, they set up their own laptop and they do their work after hours. It's a business center, it's a cafeteria, it's a cafe.
We have a couple buildings where they've set up actually not the Starbucks brand, but coffee centers and sell coffee when they use it for community use. So there's all these applications in this kind of space that reach out to the community, that reach out to kids and engage everybody in what the building's all about. And like I said, this thing, it's not even out to bid yet. It's still in cyberspace.
So give you a taste of it.
We're going to take it away from him because we're going to finish.
Because he's having too good a time here, I think. Yeah. Watch that first.
Thank you. So that's one of the ways that you can go inside a building. And Rick?
Thank you. I know we're sort of on time here. Is this working? Yeah, okay. So what does this option cost? Once again, the structure is the same as we had before. There's less site work because it's on the existing site. We're not replacing fields at this moment or anything like that. And we will hand this out. We did hand it out for it. Site development's nominal, structural costs. Construction for this new building is about $46 million. Conversely, if going over and converting the intermediate school to the middle school, it's about $18 million. There's about 43,000 square foot of new, there's no square foot of demolition, and we have 123,000 square feet. So this building is about 166,000 square feet if you make this into the middle school. The option previously at the high school, because it is larger, it does have inefficiencies. That's still close to 197,000, 200,000 square feet. So it may be nice to have extra space, but remember, you have to heat and cool, occupy, maintain. So there could be as much as an extra $70,000 to $100,000 a year for operational costs as you go through. Now on this next slide, which I think is important to discuss, the option that we call the approved PDE plan is what we derive from your study. In May, you adopted, submitted to PDE. Those are the numbers. We could not find other information that would tell us whether it was in or not, but it doesn't appear that there's numbers in there for the demolition of the intermediate school. It doesn't have any numbers in there for the construction of new fields that would be displaced or recreated elsewhere. And that's about $4.5, almost $4.8 million. So when you take that number of 4.8, add it to the 64.5, you're right in line with our option addressing the same option. Except what we've done is we've taken the money, it's less in our opinion to build the high school, and that money then is put more towards the creation of the intermediate school at that point in time where we believe there wasn't enough money being placed. However, let's go to the third option, the one you just went through, building on the high school site. We believe that high school can be built for about $46 million. We believe we can go back through and redo the middle school for $18.931 million for a total of about $65 million, which is about $5 to $6 million less than the top tiered options through there. These are just numbers. They're concepts. We don't have the room schedules finalized, but in our true heart of hearts, I think we could create an option that would give you a new high school and a new renovated intermediate school into a middle school with probably two of the finest first-class facilities in your school district a road apart for $65 million or less. And I wouldn't be surprised if we probably couldn't pull the buttons closer to 60 or even a little bit less on that. But it's just idea and planning at the moment. So as we move forward, I know we're running out of time. I'd like to have Vern talk a little bit about the cost control, and then it'll go into Q&A.
And again, just keying off some of the questions that we have, the key thing to cost control is working with your construction manager or third-party estimators right at programming. And the key thing is to start by comparing the program to the funds, being realistic. You can't will a project to a number. I don't care how hard you try or how well-meaning you are. You just end up with heartbreak. As we go through, we're going to be constantly looking for opportunities to make changes to that. Oops, that's going to hand it to me upside down, Rick. You're making it hard. So we're going to monitor the costs throughout construction. We're going to have a proactive approach to catching these. But one of the biggest ways is to get into what we call the formula, and this is the construction budget is quantity times quality times time is your cost. Change any one of them and you can change the other variable. And so one of the key things, and I think Mike alluded to this in his step process, is that these things have to be determined by the board and the cost will come out. But even more than that, there's a lot of decisions. The exterior of the building, we use a good, better, best to go back to Sears catalog. Is it EFS on the exterior? Is it oversized block? Is it higher quality masonry? Is it roof? Is it EPA DEM? Is it modified bitumen? Is it shingles or slope metal? As you go through the structures, at metal stud, ICF, steel frame, windows, metal wood clad. Is it kitchen prep? Is it full scramble? So on and so forth. Is it technology by the district? Is it the backbone? Or is it fully integrated with everything? All of those, when you choose those, will determine your cost from that qualitative standpoint. Even walls and what they're made of. Now, even hidden even deeper, and I'm going to ask Larry just to say something in a moment, is how the raw choices relative to the structure can impact.
Real quick, because I know we're running out of time. Again, I'm the structural engineer. I make the building stand up. My responsibility is to design a building that meets code and is safe for the kids. But at the same time, my responsibility is to find the right practical, cost-effective solution to every portion of the building. The framing for the auditorium doesn't need to be the same as the framing for the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I want to address STEM really quick. One of the absolute highlights, working with Upper Dublin High School, they had a STEM class, STEM Academy, and I was able to take the AP Physics and AP Math students and actually teach them how you get from raw math, raw physics into structural design of structural elements. So we talked about how a column is designed, how beams are designed, how floors are designed, how walls are designed, how foundations are designed. And then we put hard hats on them and brought them out to the construction site to show them. It was an absolute great learning experience. I look forward to the opportunity to do that here. Thank you.
And so we also have other choices in materials, terrazzos, rubbers, VCTs, VATs, our gym floors at poured rubber. Is your gym floor rubber, wood? What are you doing with that? The extent of casework. All these decisions will be what we'll go through the STEP program with you, library casework. But we've talked about structure. We've talked about site. There's the other 35% of the building we haven't talked about, which is that mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the stuff hidden in walls.
And of course, we have the same concepts in mechanical, electrical, plumbing with the good, better, best philosophy. But the key thing that we want to bring out, well, two things. Number one, you'll see good, better, best in all these different areas. I want you to know that we've done them all. Anything that you'd like to do, We've done them all. We know what the advantages are, disadvantages. As you move from left to right in this course, you go higher in price, but you also go higher in efficiency generally. So we'll discuss those things. But as these guys have alluded to many, many times throughout our presentation, this is your building. One of the things that we make a point of is to sit down with your facility director, sit down with your technology people, and say, listen, what would you like to do in your building? We've done all these systems. We know what different systems are out there. We can tell you the pluses and minuses, but we want your folks to make the decisions because it's going to be your building. When we're gone 10 years from now, and I'm probably retired, hopefully, it'll be your building, and the decisions we make now will affect the building 10 years from now. So we just want to stress that we've done these all, and we'll discuss those with your people, but it's really a choice that we'll make together.
And of course, another major choice that has to be made, and it looks like it's made itself already, is LEED. Is that or green buildings or CHIPS, any of the programs that you can utilize. Some of them are more costly. All of them lead towards having you look at better ideas, and that can impact cost. So the question then, just to cover the last couple pieces, what is success? On time, on budget, and few change orders. Probably the greatest thing is scheduling, is the reduction of risk. That is where dollars can really shed on a program. Very detailed schedule, and this is just one of several pages. But the key thing, did you end up with the laser pointer? Yeah, I stole it, I guess. Oh, you owe me one. Okay, there we are. But the most important thing to point out here is that you'll see the planning and design is about this long. Land development is a major component of this, and John's going to talk in just a moment about that.
Your entitlement process, you need to have your design in your design development, but it's dealing with outside agencies. Specifically, your big time constraints are PennDOT, anything dealing with PennDOT. So if you can avoid dealing with PennDOT, you're better off. The other one is the NPDS, the stormwater permitting. While you're not in a high quality or exceptional value stream, it still takes time to go through that Pennsylvania DEP permit. That's reviewed not only by the Conservation District, but also by Harrisburg.
So the other thing is bidding accuracy, and we're giving you a hard copy of all this, so I'm not expecting you to write any notes down, but last 10 projects, we've been under by an average of 1.55%. In terms of change order history, we've been seeing about 0.75% of change orders, and this includes a lot of renovation projects where there's a lot of discoveries. And so as I come to the close, I like to say that I think that what you're going to find, our solutions are somewhat ingenious, and we're hopefully that you'll see that it may be appropriate. So with that, just to recap who we are, why I think we're strong. We're experienced school architects. We have a great deal of understanding of both traditional and less traditional 21st century learning methodologies. We're very involved in defining what it is on the national level with AI, CAEs, and SFB and so on. We have many cost-effective design long-term relationships, extensive plan-con familiarity, so you're not going to get hung up with that, I guarantee you. And then finally, as much as anyone, we know how to find the alternative funds, if they're out there. So I would thank you, and at this point, I will try and be the MC and direct questions to my folks who might be most appropriate to answer. So,
There's something.
yes, ma'am.
Is it okay to start asking? Okay. First of all, I appreciate you thinking outside of the box. That's the first time I've even thought about that as being a possibility. So it definitely has its appeal. The estimates that you gave.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing obviously that they are estimates, are they based when you look at your good, better, best? Where did you kind of plug in?
Middle column.
Okay.
Good, better.
Okay.
So you can take some things down. You can certainly take some things up.
We're concerned about some of the other costs that we saw. We thought you were a little bit light on some of the soft costs.
Right, you mentioned
project
that.
related.
That's why there's the fact that we used it wasn't there. So rather than belabor it, we just played it safe.
Okay. And you did mention, I'm kind of jumping around here, but you did mention that there would be a pool in the new high school building.
Yeah.
And then there's a pool that exists at the intermediate school. Was that part of your budget?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was filled in?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what would be where, because we haven't talked about it.
Okay.
The pool could stay at the intermediate school. It could be added back at the high school and save that money. So I think, again, this is that whole upfront workshop of what are you expecting? And we kind of felt like, well, you maybe hadn't thought about this idea, so let's at least get it out on the table. And if you run us out of the room, okay, we tried. But I think there's some logic in getting into this in a lot of detail. And where does the pool belong in this community? I don't know. Maybe it's fine where it is.
It just belongs in the community. I know the community wants it.
You raise up a good point, because if we keep it there, it's going to be less expensive to build more classrooms at the intermediate school than to build a $3.5 million pool maybe down at the high school. But that might be where you want it.
But conversely, such as we did at Big Spring, we've infilled their old pool, created the wrestling and weight training facility, and built a new pool with a high school. It depends on what you want it to be, and we'd have to define it.
Money there for it.
Yeah.
And just one last thing, and then I'll stop talking. But so you mentioned a couple times about the nightmare that PennDOT can be. Those weren't your words; they're mine. But and that you'd like to, if at all possible, it's important to try to lessen their involvement. Would the way that you're talking about constructing, I guess I heard something about building a bridge over canal and that type of thing. So your new suggestion of having building a new high school on the current high school property would kind of eliminate the need
We were
for some of
hoping it
that
would
stadium?
mitigate. It might not completely eliminate, because you would still have your 5 fields that wouldn't be destroyed, but it'd be far fewer students.
There was a perception in a walkthrough that if the high school was segregated from the stadium,
You'd have to have a cross connect.
encouragement of people to come back and forth more aggressively and more actively if it was on the same site.
Right, agreed. Yeah.
John?
Traffic light.
John?
Or something like they have in Northern, underneath 74, where there's where 74 Northern has the advantage. You have a creek running right at the bottom, so you need to keep
Kinda gets in the way.
your tunnel above the creek elevation, but still below the road bed. So and then you have utilities in there. So it is going to be a complicated issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The intermediate school, you went through that school thoroughly, and you recommend that that building could stay the way it is, except to renovate it?
Based on our walkthrough in similar buildings by the same architect that we've touched over the years, yes. I think there are issues, but we think they're mostly ones that we can deal with and have dealt with.
We've had worse, much worse.
Oh, my God.
Much worse.
So that included then in your estimates remediation for all the asbestos that's in the building, all those heating and cooling units that hang from ceilings?
We
all that
assume
kind
new
of stuff.
mechanical system, so.
And I would question that as well. I mean, that's a different thought than that some of us have had. And just like with the electrical outlets, I mean, you basically have to go through and almost really redo all the work on that from start to finish, one
Sure,
building to the other.
And we've done it.
That's why there's more money in that building. I mean, it's very easy to renovate that building. I mean, it has classroom sizes that are larger than we would even prescribe.
In a new building, you probably wouldn't build them that large.
Now that you've opened up a whole new
Pandora's
line of
box,
thinking,
maybe?
I'd like to come back to you with this question. Is renovating the intermediate school at the current site only makes sense if you build a new high school? Is there a way to renovate both buildings and make them maybe for potentially less money, make them both come into what we're looking for?
That's what our discussion was.
Yeah, we had a very similar thought process with us, and if you saw what we looked at for the middle school, the modifications, tearing down the front portion, 26 that, creating this commons in the middle, our thought process is that by building probably 44 to 50,000 square feet on there, probably be mostly CTC and relocation of the shops, create the knowledge common in the middle, that you're probably looking at a project in the 35 to maybe $38 million range at the high school. So theoretically, you could be in a $54 to $57 million range or something like that to renovate both in situ and try and achieve the capacities you're going for. Now, the question you specifically asked us was, what wouldn't you get, if you were to renovate? Well, of course, you'd be pretty much locked with the current auditorium unless you made the giant leap to spend several $1 million more to build a new one. so you might only be able to accommodate half the students in your grow mold. Beyond that, you know, you have some circulation issues, but we think they're achievable. So it could be done. The question really comes back to you. What do you want it to be?
So if I understand you right, to do that, you threw the number there of like 35 to 40,000 or 30 million dollars.
35 to 40.
So you look at that and you add the cost to renovate the intermediate school. You don't have a huge difference between building a brand new high school.
Well, if I could maybe help you with that thinking, a lot of the states we work in have renovation percentages. Ohio's got them. Nearly every other state I've worked in has that if it costs you 50% or more to renovate a building versus replace the building, the accounting life cycle payout on the thing says build a new one.
Okay.
Because you're investing more than 50% in an old building. And you'll extend its life, but its bones are old. So, you know, when you look at being at 35 to 40 million versus 50 million, you're somewhere around 75 to 80% already. Every other state that I know of in the country would say, even the state of Ohio in their school facilities funding mechanism, once you hit 50%, same thing we've seen in New Orleans in replacement schools, when it costs 50% or more to renovate a Katrina damaged building, they build a new one.
There's another factor here that we haven't talked about, and we're not advocating either way. We're here just giving ideas, responding to your questions. With a new building, it gives you the leverage to move the children around and not interfere with their academic year. If you build a new high school, whether it's on the intermediate school site or behind the existing high
Phasing
school,
goes away as an issue for you.
Phasing goes away. You build it, you move the students in, you move it into another building, and you renovate it, and you're done. If you renovate the high school and the intermediate together, you will be moving them around within the building, dust partitions, relocatable
Modulars.
down into the Catholic diocese, empty parish buildings, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And that also will affect prices on midday. So those are some of the other things you have to look at. And it could be the high school renovation of what, 217,000, be about 230. That could be a 3-year process.
Yeah, and one of the challenges I think also is, and it depends how much money you truly have available and are willing to commit. You know, is it 60 million? Is it 50 million? Is it 40? But the other issue is the Department of Education. You have a plan con that's in the queue right now, and it's in there as a new building. And I speak to this from my personal experience where we took a renovated building. 3 days, we called PDE, said, oh, this shouldn't be a problem. We're going to move from a renovation addition and build a new building over here. We had to redo our entire plan con process in 3 days before the moratorium hit in order to get a new building to a new site. They would not allow us to change from one type of building to the other. Now, in this case, moving the new high school on a contiguous campus, which we believe we can argue that it is, would be fine. But changing from renovation to new might add some challenges.
The problem with property loses reimbursement because you'd be going from a new high school building to a renovation. And I think your reimbursement rate ratio is $4.5 to $5 million, I believe is the word that they use. You would forgo that. However, you could take the position that maybe renovating is cheaper, and you know what? If we're losing $4 million, we're saving $10 million to renovate, then it's not an issue. Those are the things that might feed up for you earlier. The discussions lead into what the direction of the budget.
See, our problem, honestly, is we don't know what went in to get us to where we are today. We don't know what the discussions were. We don't know what the community was looking at. And to go this other route, other than put a new high school in the intermediate school, so we went back and forth on, you know, maybe this horse is already run, you know. But you ask for different ideas. So here's another idea that might make some sense. And like I said, if they don't like it, they'll just run us out of town, and that'll be fine. And at least we felt we had the option, the responsibility actually, to put things on the table that maybe you hadn't thought about and see where they go. And that's why these workshops up front with the board are important, to find out what you guys really think. The other thing that always I run into in these, somewhere there are sacred cows in this district that I don't know about, and you probably do. And I don't know if that plan con submission, if that approach was a sacred cow for some reason, Or are you really open to looking at another way to go? We're just kind of operating with minimal information that we can find from PlanCon and from your website and saying, well, let's look at this idea.
It sounds.
It's what we do on every project for every client. We give you as many, in my world, there are no ideas of that idea. And until that is driven through consensus by everybody, you'll eventually distill it down into an option. But it's very nice. We look at each other after we walk the building, sir. I said, man, I wish we had a building this good all the time, because they aren't. I mean, we've got some real dog breakfast sitting out there that we're trying to improve. But the intermediate school was teed up and said, why do they want to tear this down?
I was just going to follow up with, you said it's just ideas thrown out there, but if I can grasp your sense of the right thing to do here, what I'm gathering is intermediate school, keep it, build new high school. That makes the most common sense.
Knowing what we know now, having spent several weeks thinking and ruminating on it, I think that would be our feel. But the location perhaps being at the stadium site.
At a different area.
There's a savings there. You might be able to span the stream onto the elementary school to create that road, as we talked about on our tour, that connects the three campuses.
Is either now or future or.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Go ahead. When you were here earlier, you intrigued me right at the very end of your presentation, talking about some low or no interest loans that you secure for your clients. I would like to hear you talk a little bit about that, what that was about. We didn't have a chance to really follow.
Sure. That we had the benefit. If you remember, there were a number of job stimulus programs and federal shovel-ready type things. We had a client who'd been a client for about 30 years, Williamsport Area School District, and we had identified that they had about $90 million worth of needs. Well, at the time this program came up, a number of our clients were saying, oh, I'll put in for $1 million for a roof and a parking lot and so on and so forth. And I went to the district, I said, why don't we put in for the whole thing? And they said, well, we don't want to spend the money, you're never going to get it, this is going to be whatever. I said, I'll tell you, I'll do it for free. So we did it. No one was more surprised than we got a call from the Department of Education saying, here's $42 million. And it was zero interest money over the life of the issue. So when you figure out interest at 3.5% over 28 years, it works out to be a real sum. So we started, and we became aware of a number of our clients, because of the economy, returning money back. So we contacted the department, read the regulations, and realized that if you were in the program previously, they couldn't add anybody else new, but since we'd asked for $90 million, we went back and they upped it to $72. So we were able to, because of that savings, do a $28 million renovation to their high school that they couldn't afford. They didn't think they'd be able to touch till 2024. So it's I think just an example. I mean, that program's currently closed. Who knows what's going to happen in a week and what might be new. I'm hoping that there's a more construction mentality. I mean, given the background of our new president, that, we may be building some things, but I don't know. But I've lived in that market of just trying to be creative and looking for opportunities for our clients.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to ask a general question here. I understand that, how big of a deal is it when you have a building that's on the deed to that building actually is taken up by like 4 or 5 deeds because it was slowly enlarged?
Sure.
And I understand now that has to be made under one deed. Is that a major issue? Is that a lengthy issue? Is that something that we can do fast?
Typically that's handled in the first part, design development.
Reverse subdivision.
And then you just take that in for a reverse subdivision or a lot consolidation, and you show all your parcels to combine.
It's done all the time.
It's done very frequently, and it's a 3-month process.
3 months, okay.
It used to be in York County that you wouldn't even have to go through that process, that all you'd have to do is re-record a deed, but they've changed that. So that's how common it was.
Thank you. Oh, and one more. What is your contingency budget? You talked in your book about change orders falling under the project's contingency budget.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, certainly. As you get further into PlanCon and you see the next PlanCon section D, one of the things you're going to start seeing is construction contingency. That's a set aside that when you're financing the entire project, you've built in as if it's been expended. And so that is what pays your change orders as you go into the project. So the money's there, it sits in a fund. And normally, we're looking at about a 3.5% contingency we recommend for our clients. If you spend 0.75%, what we see happen at the end of the job, quite honestly, is we go back and add some scope or buy more furniture or do whatever with the leftover contingency, because you've already told the public it will be this many dollars to pay for the project, and you've already built that in. So it's a normal part of construction, and we like to see it as an Easter egg at the end so that you can do some more things that you didn't do up front.
But it's an acceptable part of the plan.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
and
expected.
I believe I did see that I was curious as to whether or not the amount that you give us also includes furniture, site excavation, any issues that you come across? I don't know how that's handled. If we start digging and you find, I'm assuming the civil engineer will take care of that.
Lots of geotechnical test borings, yes. But the construction contingency will be anything related to the building. If you take the building, turn it upside down and shake it, and it doesn't fall out, that's construction contingency. If it's otherwise, we set separate funds and separate budgets aside for movable furniture. We will also, during design, because as I talked about, we went quickly through cost control, we set a design contingency in addition. So if we think the building is $30 million, we're going to set a 5% or a 10% design contingency depending on the stage we're at, so that if somebody says, we really need a black box theater, or we really need to have a 3D prototyping lab or a second one, and it wasn't identified up front, but curricular-wise, it makes sense. You still have that option. If it isn't used, your project comes down lower in bid day.
Like I said, 43 years of K-12. I've said the Pledge of Allegiance more times than probably anybody in this country. To me, I see two reasons why a school district undergoes what you're getting ready to undergo. Number one, aging facilities. And you know that they're reaching the time where they need work. Number two, enrollment growth. And that's something we don't know. And I'm not sure that you got a handle on it either, or you're not comfortable with whatever numbers. I mean, the number of kids determines how many classrooms you need, which determines the square footage, which determines the budget. So having not seen the enrollment projections, that would be another thing that we would do in that research part of the STEPS process, is to go back and verify your enrollment projections and what growth is projected here. I mean, I don't have any question that you're going to grow, but I don't know when that might be and how many kids that might be and what kind of housing it might be. And sometimes apartments generate 1/2 kid per unit, and other times they generate 1/4 kid per unit, and sometimes it's 2 kids per unit. So you need to do that. And sometimes it's senior citizens that aren't generating any kids, hopefully. So unless you're like me and you got all these grandchildren that want to stay with you, but then that's cool. I think we've got square footages, we've got sizes of buildings, we've got dollars attached, but it's almost like we need to go back and start at the foundation. You've got some aging facilities. There are different options with those. And we need to know how many kids we're going to be housing here. And I think that's critical for you to make credible, intelligent, defensible decisions in this community. And that's what I told you earlier. That's what the board does. That's what you're elected to do, make decisions. But you need good information.
The idea that you threw out there with renovating the intermediate school does take into consideration going from currently 2 grade levels to 3 grade levels.
Yep.
There'd be room for that?
Yes. Yeah, that's in the numbers.
When we walked through sites, I mean, literally, we sat down and said, we've got to come up with an option that can give this school district a feeling of hope on both sites. What can we do to give them the best, the optimum, the maximum school building facility that's upgraded at both sites? And we sat down. That's what precipitated the design of Green High School over here on the hill looking over the stadium and renovating the other one. And that's what we teed up for tonight.
See,
if anything you walk away, you have the ability of hopefully being able to create 2 first-class school buildings.
I worked on this other scheme over the holidays. They called me. They went through the walkthrough. They said, we got to look at how do we fit a building on that other site. My concern, honestly, was that somebody had already done this for you, and we didn't know about it. And were we going to walk in here and look foolish? I didn't know. But they said, no, Michael, get busy. So I got busy, and it seemed to work well, and we could take that building that you walked through is the one we're showing on that site, on the high school site, or on the other site, but it fits. It's just, I had to bend it a little bit here and do some stories because of the slope that goes down to the soccer fields, but it works, and it fits, and to me, it kind of makes sense. That's where your stadium is. Why wouldn't it be there?
But what it told us was, a building will work there.
Yeah.
And it will be your building designed by you and the community and the
But you said the building will work there, but what happens, because you got the creek down there. So what happens if you have a flood coming in?
We're above the 100-year floodplain.
Right. We're beyond the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah, we can't interrupt the floodplain. So if you look on the drawings that we gave you on that sketch, I've got that floodplain line plotted on there off the surveys, and the building's above that, so.
And if that's the option to go with, I can assure you, we will be very diligently have the most accurate information defining where that floodplain is, where the high water mark is. We'll make sure that whatever that is, that building's how that's in.
So I guess we're close to our time, but I thank you so much for giving us this much time to see with us.
I have
Thank
one
you.
comment.
Oh, yes, sir.
You talked about we could renovate the intermediate school and build a new high school. So what are we going to do then, tear the high school down?
Yes. Now, could you keep certain pieces of it? The gymnasium is an open field house, or possibly some of the three-story wing is maybe CTC, as opposed to building it new in the existing building. We looked at that. We just thought it was getting too many options and too much to show you tonight, but there is a potential to save pieces of it, but primarily build a new high school.
The concern we also had was you are in the queue for a new high school at the Department of Education. We've run into this before. And the moment you take some of those components and add them onto the new portion, it becomes a renovation.
But our thought process, quite honestly, was CTC does not necessarily have to be integrated into the high school. You could leave that in a freestanding component of the existing building. Gymnasiums can be freestanding as extra field houses, as long as everything you need educationally is within the four walls, and they don't have to leave the building. So there are ways to get around it. In fact, the Wellsboro High School, what we did, that was our new building, the old high school sat adjacent to it. We tore the classroom wings down, kept the core area of the building, put a community performing arts center in one portion, moved wrestling rooms in, moved the offices for the borough in, district administration offices, maintenance facilities, but because it was, we saved a lot of money, but it was an educational space, so we were able to make the new building new.
Any other questions from our directors? Folks, thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
your time
much.
tonight. Great ideas.
Go for a ride here?